cutting down 1,000-year-old trees for paper, and we can use fiber as paper products. And wow, we can get rid of these single-use plastic pieces that are floating in our oceans and create a product that biodegrades in 20 years. And the capabilities are endless. And I think when we can start to connect more people to their ability to create some change in the health systems, in our food systems, and in our effect on climate change, consumers just start to want to connect to brands and connect to this crop, and it's going to want, people want to be more involved in it. So there's just kind of this full range scope of education that can come with this crop.
Okay, so one final question that I have from my list of questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and just start reading the questions from the audience, even though we've been trying to do it throughout, is what about addiction? So how is the industry, or how are the companies being active in fighting addiction, or how are they addressing the deficits in communities impacted by the war on drugs? So the dark side of this industry. And go ahead, I don't know if any of you have an opinion, start. I know all of you must.
So I mean, I think this kind of circles back to the educational side of things as well. What the tricky part with that is addiction can start from numerous ways, and I think a lot of people do fall down the addiction rabbit hole from just being generally just prescribed a drug for something that causes a certain health benefit. What's tricky about educating people on the possibilities of how cannabis can help them stop taking pharmaceuticals or also overcome addiction, we can't really technically make a full health claim on that. A great example of a brand who I think does an amazing job of educating people and kind of making that cross barrier between pharmaceuticals and cannabis is this brand called 1906 New Highs. They have some of my favorite branding and favorite products in the game. They do a great job on social media, but they're literally trying to explain to people that there are different moods and their products are catered to different points in the day, and they're trying to show people that there's a different cannabis product for each moment and each feeling that you're feeling. I do know that there is programs out there that directly help people overcome addiction through cannabis. I'm not 100% sure on what they're called, but I know that they are out there. But again, that's been kind of my biggest thing and the reason I even got started in the industry. And how I personally educate people is just, through my personal marketing, trying to really impact, people who I grew up with from the Northeast, where cannabis isn't as acceptable as normal. And, I said before, I lived down in South Florida. There is, there's opiate issues down there. That's where the pharmaceutical mills, I think, the biggest ones are. So I do a ton of personal marketing and personal reaching out to people and providing sources to educate folks on the possibilities of using this alternative medicine. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking out 1906 for sure. They've done a great job and have great products catered to that.
I could talk to, I think we were talking about the war on drugs. So I ultimately think that one of the benefits of legalization of cannabis is the fact that it's a social justice issue. And we have an opportunity to remove a lot of our prison population. And so there's one organization led by Steve D'Angelo called the Last Prisoner Project. And it's really around making sure as we open up new markets that we're also thinking about the social justice issues around that. So I know in New York, one of the stalls around legalization in that particular state was because it didn't have necessarily the right components for social equity. So social equity and thinking through who has the right to win, right? And so this has brought up a lot of different issues around sort of opportunity and privilege. And here in California, it's been interesting to see what social equity meant as a program, and then also what it meant just to be like a little entrepreneur, because it does take a lot of capital. And I think when Canada opened up 2 years ago, what I think you instantly saw was people with money who didn't have a lot of respect for the plant and like all the people who've not really had access to a lot of money having all the passion and the education and all the real sort of OG stuff. And it was a clash. But it's looking as if, no one won. So we're trying to figure out, which is kind of hopeful in a way of like, how do you build conscious capitalism? How do you think about doing business in a different way? And I think coming out of this pandemic, hopefully people are more aware of wellness and how we're all connected. And I really do think that like what I've seen in the cannabis community can serve as a model, because I do think it is around collaboration, and really making sure that we're thinking about social responsibility as we're also thinking about profitability. And then I think someone asked about specifically addiction to cannabis. I think that's where we need more research. And I think it's not just about addiction to cannabis. I think it's also around the interactions of cannabis, or CBD, with all of the other prescriptions, drugs, and things that you might be taking. And I think that's where we need to have more research, because we don't take things in a vacuum. And there's so many factors beyond that. We all have personalized bodies, but you might be on a medication for diabetes, etc. But I hear your question around it, straight up addiction to cannabis. I haven't personally run into cases, if we're being just like straight on that question. I haven't ran into a lot of research around people who are addicted to cannabis, but LJ, like, I'm happy to talk to you offline about what that means. But from my perspective, I haven't seen specifically that research, but I know there's a lot of people who have, and so it's starting organizations and talking about thought leadership. I know there's been some research around, do you know Alice Moon? Anyone any of the moderators? I'm not sure what her condition is. Hypermesis, for people who have allergic reactions to cannabis.
I think you said the word right, actually.
I think it's hypothesis. And so we weren't having that conversation a year ago. And so a woman in the space got that, and she started doing an organization around that. So what I would say is, we are still in the early stages. And so if that is a passion area for you to do research, I think that there's space and lanes to raise awareness around those issues.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and you brought up Last Prisoner Project, Kimberly. We actually just edited all their video submissions, their 420 event and their weed map submission. And so I think we did like 5 video edits for them. We were talking to Steve and last week, and he's doing another project with, I think, Willie Nelson too. We did a video for that, so I'm really happy you brought them up. They're
amazing, a great organization,
game changer.
Can you say their name again? Their organization, or type it in the chat?
Yeah, Last Prisoner Project. I'll type it in.
Perfect. With that, we're going to get started with the questions from the audience that we have hanging here. We have a ton of questions about women and being a minority in the space. So it says, Gian, as a minority woman that used to be in education, what steps could I take to break into the cannabis field as a woman of color and just as a woman, period? Has it been hard for you to thrive in this male-dominated field? Which is interesting because John's the only guy that we have for this panel. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts about being either of color or a woman in the space, and how does it feel? Or if it's maybe it's not true, maybe it's not male dominated.
Yeah, I'll just chime in just because I am the only male. For me, I'm pretty sure cannabis has the most women CEOs out of any other industry in the entire world. So that just right there shows you one aspect of how cannabis is breaking the normal stigma and breaking through the barriers of like what we've experienced in the past, which I think is amazing. And this is actually a very common situation for me to be in a cannabis related panel or meeting and maybe the only male. So I'll just throw that out there and let the ladies take it from me.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason that attracted me to the cannabis space. Like, it's a new industry, and I think it's like ripe with opportunity to create a new reality. You know, like Kimberly said, like we came from corporate, we know how it is, and I think honestly, I think I was a little bit traumatized from corporate, and I was like, that's why I just left. But I wanted to, that's real. But I wanted to, go somewhere where I wasn't always the only one. Now, to be clear, that is not, it's not like this is, all rainbows and sunshine and, it's everything is equal. It is not. It is better, but there's still lots of opportunity. I think that, all the research shows that diverse teams are higher performing. Women-led companies are higher performing. And I think that this is, creates an opportunity for the industry to reshape and reform. And because it's so complex and it is, there are a lot of people who are very passionate about the plant and the industry, that I feel like there is an opportunity for people to kind of put kind of traditional biases, reduce them and just be really focused on all hands on deck. Let's move this ship forward. So I think myself, even, Kimberly on here, like, I want to be an example to let people know, hey, I'm here. You can come too. You can come, and how can I help you? How can I open a door for you? But do all the things, research, and don't let that be a barrier for your entry. Just, be on top of your stuff and look for those contacts and network and, put yourself out there and put yourself in the spaces to contribute.
Yeah, I see it in two different ways. I think that there's so much opportunity. It is a brand new space, so you can build those rules. I think on the flip side too, we're essentially talking about a lot of different startups, and sometimes no matter what industry you're in, like, there's ways that you can play in startups that you can't play in corporate, and a lot of startups don't have like HR departments. So I feel like, and sometimes a lot of people in cannabis have never really worked in a corporate space. So I have found that was like a sauce for lots of how do I want to say? People who don't necessarily know how to be politically correct, which is a standard in a corporate situation where they might just like straight say it. In a cannabis situation where you're a lot of like, wow, did you just say that? I think there's a lot of that, but I also feel like there is a lot of community correction. So nothing, as we get more formal, I'm sure we'll see those sorts of institutions. But I have found, like, when there have been issues, there's a lot of activists involved in this space. And so there's a whole underground team of people who will swoop in. And I'm on some group chats where it'll be someone did something in Boston and now we're all figuring out what we need to do. So I think there's so many opportunities for women and people of color. What I will say is that while I do think that there are a lot of women executives, et cetera, I think what's interesting is to look at like who has power and the money. So like when you're in a startup, you can have whatever title you want, but you do have to evaluate like who has the capital and the distribution and the power, and what does it look like at that level versus, I do agree, like on a broad level, there's a lot of people of color and women. But when I look at like the revenue generating power play, that's where it sort of mimics all the other industries.
And Brittany, any thoughts to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it helps a lot that we're a young, new industry, right? The majority of people who are really excited about getting into this are millennials and younger generations who, the progressive mindset there already exists. This idea that anybody can lead a company and women are just as powerful as men. I mean, that's kind of already at the base of this industry. And I know, speaking as a white woman is very different than speaking as a Black woman. And I've seen so many incredible women of color leading businesses and startups. And it's amazing to see that this industry has opened the door in so many ways. I've met some really badass female farmers who say, this plant is female. When the males come in and pollinate, that's when everything gets messed up. So the males ruin everything. So in order for this plant to really be grown at its fullest magical capacity, only a woman can understand. And I love that finally women can kind of step in. I mean, talk about a male-dominated industry. How many farmers have you seen out there growing corn that are female? I mean, there's just not a lot. So to see how many strong female farmers are starting to get into this space, and the men around her are saying, oh yeah, we don't touch the plants. We only let her touch it because she gets it. I mean, that's powerful. Just from story perspective.
Absolutely. And I have so much to say about that, but I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to ask you this question, Brittany, and it says, if each of you had $1,000 to invest, what would you use it in? How would you use it? So quick, short answer. If you had $1,000, where would you put it in this cannabis industry?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm a little hippie over here, and I'm totally focused on the sustainability aspect of this. And I think the promise of hemp as a form of carbon farming and sequestration to start to remove some of the carbon out of our atmosphere, I think has huge potential. If we can start paying our farmers to grow regeneratively and start pulling carbon out to allow for bigger corporations to become carbon neutral, the promise there for me from a social, sustainable goal standpoint is huge. So I would invest into some carbon farming capabilities.
John, Takesha, and Kim.
I'm so sorry. I was responding to some chats there. What was the question?
If you had $1,000 to invest it or create a company or put it somewhere and get started, how would you do it?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I think I would just put all that money back into some type of research program in the space. You know, it's just like I feel like most of our conversations like circle back to like the educational side of things. So I would put it directly back into like education and developing some type of platform to keep the efforts that people like my program Cannabis Doing Good and Last Prisoner Project and research or push that forward in some type of way.
Yeah. Takesha?
I'm kind of on the line with Brittany in terms of like investing in hemp, because there's so many uses of the plant, but even in Florida, I know that they've been investigating hemp concrete, with hurricanes, and it's more durable and can withstand hurricane winds, and being in Florida and also seeing places that have been devastated by hurricanes. And if that a new form of concrete can help with sustainability of people's homes and livelihoods, I think that's where I'd go.
And Kim?
I would try to mirror a passion or something that I already have. One of my friends who I think has made that most actual cash makes infographic posters for the cannabis, where she did illustrations of cannabinoids, etc. So while she wasn't in the industry, she made a product that a lot of companies wanted to put on their wall. So I found that a lot of the auxiliary things that might not be as sexy have actually made a lot of actual cash flow. So, customizing a cone tip or something so tiny, but like lots of companies just want to buy those promo items or that thing. And so there can be a lot of money with lower investment in the accessory auxiliary space that you have a lot of, especially when your customer is cannabis companies and there's not a lot of people.
And a quick follow-up, Brittany, what are some companies that are doing high tech around cannabis? So whether it's AI, or I know you mentioned also Vega, obviously, but who are some industry players in the high tech space in cannabis?
Well, I have to play up our work a little bit here. We're really excited about our use of drones and LiDAR technology to be able to help farmers actually predict with machine learning their crop density. So there's there's the tech side of actually growing and being able to recognize when there are pests in the fields and being able to throw some of those beneficial insects out there. But there's the extraction equipment is growing and molding, and from aqueous to CO2 to ethanol. I mean, there's the ways that we can start to process this hemp is growing. If we're looking at taking the hemp biomass and turn it into a plastic, it exists, it's out there. Unfortunately, it's all kind of in research phase right now because it does take a lot of money and investment to go large scale there. But I think we're headed in that direction, because the reality is that there's this flood of growers into the space, and the supply is massive. And in order to move forward in this industry, it's really going to come down to who can most efficiently grow, who can most efficiently extract and retail, and who can do it in the most innovative and high quality standard ways. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more players in that ag tech space. Right now, we're still trying to, I think, work out a lot of kinks of the supply chain first, but it's definitely headed in that direction.
Yeah, and we're getting a ton of questions from international participants. So we have people in London, in Germany, in Ecuador, in Greece, and in Australia connected. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask any of you that work with international companies if are any of you working with Latin America currently? No. Germany, a little bit. Okay, Germany. Yeah. And London. And yeah, okay, Kim. So, any advice for people trying to break in the industry internationally? Any of the specific countries? So, Ecuador, Germany, Greece, or the UK?
I think it's the same advice applies if you're already living there. So some of the actual biggest conferences, actually, I think when I found out about COVID was whether or not I was going to go to Cannabis, which is a cannabis conference in Spain. So I would say actually a lot of the more scientific educational conferences happen often outside of the US. A lot of the research and science is coming out of Israel, let's say. So Israel, I think their conference, one of them is Cannatech, and that's a really big one in Israel. South Africa did a lot of amazing opening up last year. Germany has a huge medical market, and it has a huge market for CBD as well. All these countries, it's the same thing about getting involved in understanding the unique dynamics of those countries. In Latin America, the models are looking slightly different because of how prescriptions get rolled out. For example, in Brazil, you actually would have to get a doctor to approve you to buy those goods, and then you have to buy them in bulk through a government sort of sanctioned store. So each of these different locales are going to have sort of different rules, and it's about being connected into them. I think Latin America, there's a lot of opportunity from the growing side. So a lot of grows are happening in Colombia, and using that as an export vehicle on the hemp side. In Europe, I think that's a market from a consumption side and consumers. And it's interesting, I was recently doing some research around France, and only 40% of the French knew what CBD was. So it's interesting. There is a whole globe to go after. And so it's really understanding and doing a competitive analysis of what country I want to focus on. That being said, California is the 6th largest economy in the world. So you can make choices about what you want to put your efforts in.
Got it. I'm going to ask you another question that we have here. Lots of questions about COVID and how the industry, I have read that the cannabis industry is recession proof. We have a question that says, do you think that there is greater hope for federal cannabis legalization given the amount of debt the country is incurring and the growing unemployment rate in the country because of COVID-19. And then we had a question out of Denver that says, we're getting ready to see a drop in wholesale prices in flower in Colorado due to no tourism this year. This is going to have a massive effect on cannabis market. What does the future look like with this new reality? How do the smaller businesses survive? So because there are so many questions about COVID, I want each of you to answer what is your general opinion about the future of cannabis and how the industry is behaving now because of it. We can start with Brittany.
Sure. I think, like the ag industry, hemp and cannabis is going to continue to be, moving forward. Nothing has slowed down on our end. Farmers are still gearing up and ready to go for the season. They're excited.
Hello.
I think what it's going to come down to is,
Hello.
at the end of the day, as people start to cut,
You're from where?
those extra costs out of their daily life that they maybe won't need. CBD and cannabis, medical may go with that, unfortunately. So unless we've kind of bridged that connection between this being a nutraceutical that people, have just built in, like any other vitamin, fish oil, this is just something I take every day. I think that's where a lot of our consumers are. So from my perspective, from a CBD, rec purchasing standpoint, I don't see that dropping tremendously, but I could be wrong. I'm not on the retail side as much as some other people are. So, but from a farming perspective, other than a slight risk, most of our farmers are just as excited to get the hemp in the ground this season.
Kim, John, and Takesha, go ahead.
I think what we saw was an initial sort of bump in terms of sales. What is not known is whether that was pantry loading and people aren't going to go back and buy more. However, a lot of people are experiencing peak anxiety, and there's a plant that can help you with that. So I think from that perspective, I think we'll continue to see good numbers. And I think people who can actually support that growth will do well. I think the marking of being an essential business in a lot of these states bodes well for a further push for legalization. Nancy Pelosi, when talking about the second round of the disaster relief funding, was making a big push to include cannabis companies here in the state of California, because there's inequity in the fact that we're deemed essential workers, yet we don't have access to any of the COVID related relief programs. So there's been a lot of lobbying for that particular effort. I think cannabis will come out stronger than ever. I think if anything, it'll create psychologically more demand. And I think businesses in general are going to be changed, and business models. What also happened out of COVID was an increase in delivery and curbside pickup, which was not really it was a starting model. That's how I've been getting my cannabis for the last 8 months. But I can't see myself personally going back to a dispensary when it just comes at my, to my door. I'm actually in a Costco for cannabis type.
I'm so jealous of you. We don't have delivery here for some reason. It's
70% off retail pricing. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff coming from delivery, e-com on the cannabis side of the market, and a lot of interesting tech plays to support those back ends. I think that's going to be a real interesting piece of the market that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I think in general, this could lead to faster legalization because for capital for the country, so cannabis is highly taxed, and this could be a way to recoup, billions of dollars by, fast tracking federal legalization. Also, I think to the point about anxiety, a lot of people are using cannabis and CBD products for anxiety. In Florida, CBD has not been deemed an essential business. So, and they're trying to, get that changed because, again, a lot of the smoke and vape shops, which sell CBD primarily, they're not open. And actually on the news here, I was listening yesterday, they said that there was a 12% increase in anxiety meds for the first time as it was declining. So I'm like, okay, does that have to do with the fact that people, may not have the same access? Granted, a lot of people can't order online, but also, people go and pick up in stores. So overall, I'm with him. I think cannabis is gonna come out better on the other side of this. I was reading a report by New Frontier Data and around investments, and they said like 60% of stakeholders were still bullish about the cannabis market for 2020. So, I think that it will come out better.
And John, I'm going to let you answer that if you would like, but I also have a ton of questions around marketing. And so Mia here says, if you have any advice for designers trying to break into the industry. And we have a question about Facebook advertising that reads, if there are any, now that platforms like Facebook are allowing advertising for CBD topicals, when do you think we'll see those rules become more friendly, and what do you think more brands are jumping on the opportunity now?
Yes. So I kind of want to just circle back to the other, what the ladies just were touching on, because I think that that's super important to talk about. I agree with everything that all three of them said in regards to, COVID really pushing things forward and seeing a lot of progressive change in the industry, and I think for the good. I think that COVID's going to really and is currently opening the eyes of so many people who may have been against cannabis in the past, especially being it deemed essential. To kind of finish the original question you asked, based off there's going to be changes in wholesale and retail pricing because of COVID, and how are the little players going to be protected in this? Because Kimberly brought up the fact that there is it's kind of balanced out now, but there is this huge influx of corporate money and these big organizations that came in, and then there's all of these grassroots organizations who stem from passion and who grow the best product and just live and breathe cannabinoids and helping people. And there has been a huge clash, and I think it's balanced out. And I think that sooner than ever, the future of cannabis needs to have some type of standard. And I think that's something that we're really working on with Cannabis Doing Good. And I think that having a standard will actually protect those little players who are strictly basing their involvement in the industry based off of passion and don't have that secure funding or the resources available that some of these corporate entities have. And when I say standard, I mean that from every single aspect. I think that there needs to be some type of equity standard. There needs to be a community standard. There needs to be an environmental standard. There needs to be a standard of how you treat your employees. There needs to be a standard of how lab tests are secured. And I think that having that type of standard sooner than later in the industry at a local and a global level will protect those people who have been in it since the beginning and who have been pushing forward the legalization and saving them from people who don't even consume the plant and are super conservative and don't they're just in it for the money. So I think that's one way that the cannabis community and politicians can come together and create the standard to protect the people who are actually in it for the right reasons. So the industry remains, cannabis is such a sacred plant, and people forget that. It's been around for centuries. So I just really hope that we people like all of us can come together and make that happen. And aside from that, the marketing side of things, anyone who is a designer or any type of marketing background in general, there's some. I mean, obviously, I'm going to preach Puff Creative all day, but things are ramping up for cannabis marketing agencies right now. Everyone is realizing the value of e-commerce and the possibilities of selling CBD at a national level. The value of branding and marketing and having a user-friendly digital website and social media platform in general. It's 2020, so I recommend reaching out to a lot of different agencies like us. There's Wick and Mortar, Kind Time, There's agency, there's Hatch Creative, who we do campaigns with in Israel. There's Plexus Media, an advocacy agency over in Canada. Reach out to any agency. You can do digital work anywhere in the world. So find out who these agencies are, and also just utilizing LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become a huge source of information in the cannabis industry and people getting jobs. And again, I think Keisha brought up, Angst Online. There's another hiring for executives called Hunter Esquire. They specify in like hiring executives and stuff like that. Um, Leading into the Facebook and Instagram advertising, yes, the advertising rules have become a bit more lenient for topical CBD brands. Most of the advertisements that you're going to be seeing going through are the topical brands, and you're seeing major players like Burt's Bees, Dr. Bronner's, getting involved, and all of a sudden you're seeing their hemp products pop up on the site, and you're seeing ads for them going through. I do think that the floodgates for advertising on social media and Google are going to be open sooner than later. You are starting to see ingestible CBD ads going through. Right now, we're seeing them go through for people who have the biggest budgets for some reason. And we're still having issues with people who aren't putting in a huge ad spend on social media. But we are getting ads to go through, and it's really tricky. Sometimes we need to create a alternate landing page that's safe to direct those ad links to, so it doesn't link back to a flag on a website that has an ingestible or THC product. Papa and Barkley in particular does a really good job of advertising their hemp and their THC line and differentiating between those gray areas of the laws, which is really cool. They're a great example. In regards to cannabis, I think it's going to be a little bit of a longer wait for those types of social media ads to go through, which is unfortunate. I'm hoping it's sooner than later. But there is, just because it's not federally accepted yet, it's going to be a little bit of a wait. But there is little tricks of the trade. So if you have a cannabis company like Puff Creative, who's an agency, or someone who offers like a technology service and actually isn't touching the plant, we are finding tricks to get pay-per-click to go through. We are finding tricks to get social media ads to go through for those companies as well. So it's way better than it used to be. Where I think the first year Puff Creative started, I tried doing an advertisement for I think just Puff Creative, and not only did my my ad account get shut down, but they shut down my Facebook page. They shut down all of my clients' Facebook pages. They shut down my Instagram account. They flagged all the Instagram accounts I was logged into. So thank God that doesn't happen anymore, because that was a complete nightmare having to deal with that. So it's really cool to be like, on the front line, like navigating this great waters. So I think I threw my email in there for anyone who wants to reach out and talk more about that, because I could go all day. So sorry, I'm like babbling on about this stuff.
No, it's okay. There's so much information, and that's the reason why we have this today as an intro, but we could go on and on. And it is 2:30, and I want to respect everyone's time. So we have a ton of questions unanswered, 17 to be exact. So I've copied them. I'm going to write them on a document. I'm going to get some of these brilliant people to answer them for you guys, so they're not going to go unanswered. And I just want to end with one question. What is the future of flower? So if you can imagine 10 years into this, where is it going? And that's it. Then we'll say goodbye. So Takesha, go ahead. What is the future of flower?
Well, I see it as the next consumer packaged goods industry. So the same way, you buy other brands, I see it as, there's going to be brands within the cannabis industry in the CBD space, big brands, little brands. But it's going to be, there's going to be research behind it. You're going to be able to make product claims, because the research will be done. And I see it as, again, the next nutritional supplement, just something else that you would buy like you would buy any other product.
John?
Sorry, I was on mute. I totally agree. I think that it is really headed in that direction. From a branding and marketing perspective, you're only seeing, cleaner, tighter, more defined branding and messaging. Really, I mean, a lot of brands are taking a more feminine approach to their branding and marketing and messaging in general, which I think is amazing. And for me, I really hope that and what I envision and what I'm working towards right now is to have a safe, sensible access for humans at a global level to this medicine that can change everyone's lives in so many ways. And that's the future I hope for, and like pretty much what I've dedicated my life towards. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with like everyone who's a participant and all the panel members after this to keep working towards that goal.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you, we had 247 people connect, so be expecting lots of contact information. Brittany, what is the future of flower?
God, it really feels like it is kind of this endless expanse of what we can do with this. More than any industry I've ever been in, it is the most passionate group of people, of founders, of leaders, of employees who legitimately want this plant to do good for the world and for the people. And I think when we have that behind us, it's going to continue to grow. I think we're going to see, you're right, in every possible food product, in every possible form, we're going to see the full range of every cannabinoid broken out into its individual components. I think then to just come back and realize that it's best when it's all taken together anyways. But this is an industry that I just see continuing to grow and expand out, not just from the nutraceutical space, but really branching out into a ton of different uses. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
And Kimberly, wrap us up.
What I love about this space is that it's a movement. It's not an industry. It's literally a way of life. I think that once you realize that there's a plant and it works with a system inside of your body, I think it takes it to an almost slightly spiritual level. And I think we've been uncomfortable with those types of conversations or thoughts in industry before. But I think that cannabis can lead a way for a new type of how we think about wellness, how we think about our health, and how we think about doing business. I think it also can lead to how we think about what ingredients and supplies we use as it relates to things that are not ingestibles or consumptions, as it relates to fiber and paper and more regenerative. And so I absolutely want everyone to be a part of this space if you feel called to this work. It is going to not only change just the industries we're in, but like literally change people's lives and how we do business.
Awesome. So Brittany, John, Kim, Takesha, thank you so much. We're going to be sending this recording out. We're going to be wrangling all of the resources that we said for you guys. We're going to be answering your questions that got left unanswered. And you are going to get everyone's LinkedIn and maybe emails if they allow me to. I know they're happy to share, and resources to Keisha's infused dining experiences and Kim's courses that she teaches, and John's marketing expertise, and Brittany's leading the way in AI and drone and the supply chain of hemp. So thank you so much to everybody, and I hope to see you soon. All right, take care. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.